capability of fishing out a species. And I mean, we'd already killed off dodo birds or whatever it was. You know, so, but of course I came along around that time in the mid-70s, and, you know, I could see things, and, you know, the destruction of, you know, mining and logging and all those kinds of things, and how they were affecting fish stocks. And there was whole river streams that were already wiped out by the mid-70s. Certain mines had come along, and of course their tailings had gone into the rivers and completely poisoned them. Even in ones like Campbell River and stuff had whole genetic streams completely wiped out. But anyhow, so it's always been important to me to keep that going, and so Ben and I often chat about things at length. He's commercial fish too, and he loves eating fish, and so do I, and so we kind of worship those things, and so that's why you're here. But anyhow, so I often try and pick one species or something, but I know this time you guys are a salmon group. They call it salmon.
That's right.
And it just so happened that, well, for one thing, I have salmon is kind of the dearest thing to my heart, and of course in our fish species, even on my phone, is my daughter with a nice big spring salmon, you know, so I can't help but be constantly thinking about them. And I do a lot of different work in the salmon department. I'm on the board for the Pacific Salmon Foundation, which is a non-profit that raises money and awareness in stream and salmon enhancement, and I, you know, numerous other things, work with different groups in trying to save what's left of our Pacific salmon. And just so happened that I was just away for 2 weeks, and both things were completely related to that. And so I thought, well, let's talk about it a little bit. And the first one was, I don't know if you guys know where Rivers Inlet is, or do you know, probably all heard of the Great Bear Rainforest. Again, has anyone not heard of the Great Bear Rainforest? Okay, well, that's good. So that is, in coastal terms, that's what we call the central areas. So, you know, if I'm talking to one of my fishing buddies, or even a fish company, or even someone from DFO, I'm not going to tell them I'm going to the Great Bear Rainforest. That's a new buzzword, and it's lovely, don't get me wrong. I'm going to say I'm going to the central areas. And there's a whole bunch of inlets in there, fjords as they call them in Norway. But so that's right in the middle area of the province here. So you can see that here. So sort of above the top of Vancouver Island and below Kitimat and the northern Haida Gwaii areas. And in there is a river called Rivers Inlet. It's quite a large inlet. Yeah, there's river. So you can see it's a big one. And all these glaciers feed it. And that and Smith Sound, which is the one down here, had huge sockeye runs. There was a time when there was 20 canneries up in that inlet alone. The sockeye are completely gone due to logging and mining in Rivers and Smiths. But there's there's a native village right on the mouth of one of the main rivers, the Wannock River. It comes out right in there, and they've managed to save the spring salmon. And so we helped fund them to start with it. So a guy named Percy Walkers, who's still alive, he started the doing some hatchery work there. Now, as soon as I say the word hatchery, I want you to know that I don't believe that hatcheries are the answer to saving salmon. I believe it's one of the tools that we have available that can be a help if it's used right. And that's a big problem because it's a tool that can be used wrong, and when it's used wrong, it doesn't have a good future to it. And unfortunately, our Department of Fisheries out of Ottawa doesn't seem to be too good at doing a lot of things. So when they got involved with hatcheries, they just came up with their idea, and then they ran that way because they could produce lots of numbers, which sounded great. And I use this all the time, sorry. Gets them lots of votes because it's all running on politics. And the problem is that when you produce lots of numbers just randomly, you start wrecking the genetic diversity and all kinds of things. And the fish just get smaller and smaller. This hatchery, this one, they made a huge effort to not go down the path of DFO. In fact, do stuff that DFO says is wrong, but they produce salmon that are as large as they've ever been. And so I just printed this off actually, so you guys could go, when you get into your studying mode, you can go and bring it up on Google and read about it properly. So it's just kind of here, go look at this stuff online. It'll tell you about the hatchery, and they're producing spring salmon that are 50 to 100 pounds, and not just some. That's what they do. And so it's been highly successful. Of course, DFO shut them down about, when you read about it, about 25 years ago, because they took their funding away. So that's when the Salmon Foundation came in, and we started funding them and also helping them, providing them science and equipment and what have you. And so I went up to Rivers Inlet too. There's a few fishing lodges there, and one of them's called Duncanby. And the guy that owns that lodge, he kind of pulls it. He's a real community building type of person. So he's kind of pulled people from all over the coast together and to help that hatchery and provide money. So once a year, at the beginning of June, they do this hatchery opening process, and they invite people like me, mostly old guys. There was a few gals there too, thank goodness. And we all go up there and we see what developments have happened, and then we all put our work together too and have a fundraising evening. And so I just came back from that, and I just wanted you guys to look at it, that hatchery and the ideas behind hatcheries. And truly, like I said, hatcheries aren't the answer, but you need to have answers if you want, like those salmon streams supported, you know, a huge ecosystem, obviously, the whole British Columbia before a white man came. And part of that ecosystem was some humans too, as we know. But those salmon streams can't support, 3 million people in Vancouver and Victoria, and 1 million up Vancouver Island, and it's just, our salmon streams will not support that. If you want to have a sports fishery, or everyone wants to have something a little bit to eat. And so if you're going to start doing that, then man has to come in and, you know, carefully monitor what you're doing and make sure you don't catch it all, of course. And or maybe there's things that you can do to make it so, you know, I mean, by the time you guys are my age, you'll probably be 10 or 20 million people on the West Coast here. You know, it's gonna happen. Everybody's trying to move here. And so these are the kinds of things that I wanted to talk about, to think about as you're studying salmon, is that, you know, there's ways to do all kinds of things, but right now, one of the things that DFO doesn't do and isn't really being done is what I'm talking about. And there's some other examples of what you can do. But I want to talk about something a little bit different, but it's along the same lines. Is I just went to a funeral of a guy after I got back from the Great Bear Rainforest. I went to a funeral of this guy. John Stockner is his name, and I just printed off one of his papers here. I did print it, just the opening page, so you guys could Google him too. And he was a limnologist, and he got onto a track of trying to make the water more productive for salmon. But more specifically, he realized that the salmon at their early age, as soon as they're going through the egg to larva stage and they're coming out of that, they need rich waters to be in, to feed on, because that's that survival rate to get them through into being a smoked or larger fish. They need that rich water to feed in. So he figured that out. And there's one that, I don't know how much you guys have learned about salmon and life cycles of our 5 Pacific salmon that we have on this coast. But for example, spring salmon and coho, their juveniles stay in the fresh water for even up to 3 years. Sockeye stay in for 1.5 years, and they must live in a lake. So all sockeye runs go into a river that has a big lake system, and then another river upstream of that to spawn in. So Okanagan Lake is an example, Shuswap Lake. And so what this guy figured out is that he could fertilize those lakes where the freshly hatched sockeye come down into, and have you know, lots of little copepods and what have you for the little fry to live on, and get a way higher recruitment from the spawn of the fish. So there was whole runs. There's a good article I noticed online about what he did at Babine Lake, and that run is a huge success. They actually have a fence up there on the river, so they actually let a certain number of fish go in, and then they put the fence up, and then the native village that's there go out and scoop up whatever's left in the lake that's trying to get up the river to spawn. And then there's a fishery down, all the way down the Skeena to the mouth of that Prince Rupert, and you know, all the other native bands have been, and there's a commercial fishery at the mouth of the Skeena River. And before he did that, there was not enough fish for any kind of fishery and to sustain whole villages. So he's very famous, this John Stockner guy, and it was his funeral I went to, and it was rightly was rightly at Babine Lake. And in fact, we scattered his ashes in the river coming in, so it flowed into the lake, so he fertilized the lake a bit himself, personally. So that was, so we had a pretty good party after that. Anyhow, so I wanted to bring that up as some positive stuff that we've been able to do for salmon reproduction. And so there's all kinds of things that we can do that are organic and simple and effective. But that's what, you know, we're counting on you guys to do as young people. We can get them on the way out. Okay. I, myself and a few other fishermen came up with another thing, but of course we're fighting with Ottawa because they don't want us to do it. But you know, there's a large sports fleet for spring salmon in particular in British Columbia. If you don't know, well now you know. That's the one my daughter caught. It's on there. Anyhow, so and they all go fishing, and there's all these hot spots like out at Souk and, you know, Langara Island and where all the lodges are. They're just real hot spots for spring salmon coming in. So one idea that we came up with was if we could get some smolts from a good hatchery and then bring them down and pen them in a certain place, they would come back there. It's called ocean ranching. And it's actually a massive industry in Japan. They ocean ranch for chum salmon there, and anybody can get a license, and you just have to have a bit of shoreline, and you have to have fresh water, so the guy will have, you know, lease a bit of shoreline, and he'll get a license from the government. He digs a well, so he's got water coming, sluice boxes, hatches out the chum, let him go, and then in the fall he just takes a net and circles it out and catches his bounty. So that's called ocean ranching. Well, our government doesn't agree with it for some reason, and they've made it illegal in British Columbia. But anyhow, even though they did, myself and some other fishermen, we got some spring salmon smolts, like about 1 million, and
what's up? What's your name?
got about 1 million smolts and built a pen in the mouth of Victoria Harbor. And a couple of falls later, all these spring salmon were coming back to the harbor mouth. And the sports fishermen soon figured it out. So now, there used to be like 500 boats in a weekend off Beachy Head out by Souk. Now there's 0. They're all right here, not burning any fuel. They just, some of them go out in kayaks and catch spring salmon right in the mouth of Victoria Harbor. And they don't burn any fuel, and they're not catching any wild stocks. It's all the wild stock that go by out at Souk at those the old salmon hotspots. It's so successful, people are forgetting where to go catch wild fish. And they just go right here. Isn't that true, Rich? He goes out there and he takes friends out, and they get great fishing right there. And so it's taken a massive pressure off those wild stocks that are coming from rivers like the Cowichan and Fraser that need to rebuild, you know. So there's little things like that that, you know, I just want to talk about with you guys to get you thinking about wild salmon and yeah, don't forget what a wonderful thing it is. The other thing I wanted to mention was, of course, you guys know that, I mean, you've heard and you've got a basic understanding that they go all through British Columbia. But just to give you some perspective, you can go and view large spring salmon in the river right beside Jasper, Alberta. That's how far they go. That's the upper reaches of the Fraser River. I mean, think about that. I mean, wow. And we have all these huge trees. You guys, I don't know if any of you are from the East Coast, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick, or even coastal Quebec, like Gaspé and stuff. And when you're there, you'll notice that all the trees are about this big. And are any of you guys from out there? No. But if you ever go out there, you'll notice the trees are all about this big. Here they're like this big. And they used to actually have a huge timber industry out on the East Coast. They just don't grow big anymore. There used to be salmon there. There isn't any salmon now. You can do the math. So you can understand how concerned people like myself are. And I've watched the reduction now for 50 years. And wow, it's so scary. It really is. But Ben, do you want to?
Well, I think it's pretty interesting perspective on what hatcheries could offer to the overall picture. And tomorrow morning, we're going to go to Goldstream Hatchery, which is another closer example of a community hatchery. And I think it's a really valid question to think, okay, what are the practices that could be put in place at these community-based hatcheries that could really, really help? I'll talk more about hatcheries tomorrow, but yeah, that's a super interesting point. In terms of wild fish, Bob, I'm curious, what do you think? We're also going to DFO on Wednesday, today's Monday, right? To talk to the salmon stock biologists, etc. But it seems like a pretty bad story in terms of the management by DFO of wild fish. What do you think they could do differently now? How could things change in terms of DFO policy to bring about a resurgence of wild fish, wild or hatchery fish, open ocean fish?
Wow, you don't want to ask me that question. You don't want to ask me that question. The first thing you have to do is just get rid of everybody and every process they have, because everything they're doing is not right. And I don't know, I can't, that's unanswerable. I'm too negative and jaded to answer it too. I mean, obviously not everything they're doing is wrong, but wow. That's all I can say.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What would be the first thing you'd change or get rid of?
Well, first of all, you do the simple things. There's only some things that you can control, and they're human activities. So the first thing that you would do is you'd look at the environmental side, and you would, habitat destruction. You just take the whole laws of environmental, inspections and environmental, when they're building on building sites and logging, no matter what it is, mining, get all what they have now and start again with those issues. Salmon farming, open net cage salmon farming. I don't care. I think salmon farming is great. But fuck! Not open net cage. It's so easy. Just stop it. You've got the control. Sorry about the F-bomb. But I mean, it's just another example. It's just like everything they're doing is wrong. Is that a small issue? We'll reduce some of them here and we'll do a little there. Just get rid of the whole works. They've done a few in the Broughton. right around where everyone sees them,
That's where we're going to see.
you know, so they've done that. But are they worried about Clackwood Sound at all? No. Run's totally wiped out there now. Kennedy Lake and stuff, where it was massive soccer. No, I mean, you know, so the first thing you do is you'd start with the environmental stuff. You know, it wouldn't be easy. I mean, it's like the whole idea, you know, is climate change real, or should we just keep building pipelines and cranking up oil production? You know, well, I guess if your house doesn't burn down or something, maybe it's okay to do that. But, you know, if your house burned down, maybe you wouldn't want to do that. You know, it's, so, yeah, it's a hard one. You know, I don't think, and then of course you have to carefully monitor how much fish is being caught in different places. So when DFO manages fisheries, they think that managing fisheries is, what people see. So like the commercial fishery. So they manage that. And they came to us years ago and they're like, please help us come up with management systems and stock assessment techniques and work with us. So we did. And we got the commercial fishery a good portion, except trawl, extremely well managed. But they wouldn't do trawl because it was too sensitive. It was all the votes on the East Coast. And if you don't get all the votes on the East Coast, you're not gonna get in next time. Those are big votes. So they wouldn't do trawl. So, you know, there's an example. They were trying to do fisheries management. So they did some fisheries management. You know, we're talking about the exploitation rate right now, right? Okay, you get a stock, you know, say you are able to do a good stock assessment. You guys understand this? Have you learned enough fishery science? Are you with me still, or am I? Okay, good. So you've done a stock assessment. You know that you could maybe take, say, 500,000 fish out of, say, the fish coming back in the Fraser River. So then you get your fishing boats properly monitored so you know how much they're catching, and you make sure you don't catch over 500,000. So you don't just take one sector, it's like those commercial fishing, but not the trawl. I mean, they were, up until last year, the amount of salmon the trawl industry was taking was just unbelievable. Now they're on 100% retention, so they have to keep every salmon. So they can't just throw them over the side and then, you know, catch 10,000 Chinook and get away with it. So, but that took until last year. I've been fighting with them for 30 years to do that. Anyhow, so, and then, yeah, so they manage part of the commercial fishery, but not all of it. And then all the other fisheries, they don't manage them at all. They have no idea really, well, they have estimates of what the sports fleet catches. Well, I'm a sports fisherman, as you guys already know, and they've never counted the fish I catch. So, never. I've never been boarded or asked how much fish I've caught in my life. And wow, I fish a lot. So, I mean, you know, and then there's the whole indigenous fishery too, and that there's zero management there, so they got no idea what they're taking. So, you know, there's the next thing is manage what is being exploited. And don't have one policy, well, we'll manage these guys and then just zero in on them and like manage them so they all go broke. And then just leave everyone else just catching whatever they want.
And that trawl fishery, that's the West Coast hake fishery?
One of the things that I do, no, it's all trawl fishing.
Okay.
All trawl, sole, you know, It's a huge fishery. So one of the things that commercial fishermen like us got involved with was building some marine protected areas. So back in the 80s, we made the suggestion to build rockfish protection areas because they're very sedentary and they live in one spot their whole life. And some of the areas had been fished down to very few rockfish, like in front of Victoria and in the Gulf of Georgia. So we got together with DFO and made all these closures. So, well, first of all, great example. They're closed to everybody except Indigenous people and draggers, the trawlers. Like, give me one of those hammers. Like, wow. What? Can you imagine you're trying to save something and you let the trawlers fish there? So it's not, they're not closed to the trawlers. The rockfish protection areas, there's about, I can't remember how many, there's about 50 on the coast. And all the sports fleet fishes in them because they think it's gonna be better fishing in them. And DFO knows this. They fly over with a plane and they know that there's more people fishing in the rockfish protection areas than there is out. And yet we put in this great idea of having these marine protected areas, and they're a marine, okay, you should fish their area, not protected at all. I mean, so if you're going to DFO and you want to ask them what they can do, wow, the first thing they should do is just get fired. You know, any normal place, you would just get fired for that.
What do you think about no-take zones?
That's what I'm talking about, a marine protected area. But you can't let other people take them, so they keep out the longliners and the trollers, some of the actual hook and line fishermen, but then they let a dragger go in there?
And that's true for all those areas? They're all true
For
for all?
rockfish protection areas.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Huh.
Wow. Lincoln, for example, it closes for everyone, even for native subsistence fishery in the winter. Closes from November to April 1st. Even the Indigenous people aren't allowed to fish there, and they don't. They respect it. It's open for trawling. The draggers can fish in them. And guess what? What do you think? Of course they fish in them all winter because no one's there. So it's better. So they fish their lingcod when it's closed to everyone else. For science, it's because that's when they do their spawning, and the males guard the eggs. And they're conglomerated, they're easier to catch. So, and the draggers think their scientists tell DFO, yeah, we don't catch any females. Well, we know that. You're fishing on the spawning ground, and it's all the males are there guarding the eggs. But DFO's like, oh, no, they're good, we don't catch any females. And we're arguing with them. Like I say, even the natives are arguing with DFO to get the draggers out of there.
Gotcha. And they can market that fish.
Well, of course, it's all closed for everyone else, so they're gonna get more money. I mean, anyhow, if you guys wanted something positive, you probably came to the wrong place. But this kind of stuff is positive. There is some positive stuff going on, but you know, DFO tried to shut down the Percy Wallis hatchery, and they're against everything that we do there. I mean, we select animals carefully and try to get their mate, because they're often mated up, the spring salmon. They mate up like way out at sea and they follow each other in. So they try to do that and they mix those eggs in. They don't just kill a whole bunch of females, pour them in that's what DFO does. Pour them in a vat like 8 feet across, you squirt a bunch of sperm in there, give it a good stir around, and what do you get? A bunch of springs like this. Anyhow. So, there you go.
That's good. I mean, that is positive, I think, to say that. Campbell River shows that same, we'll stop at Campbell River. We're gonna go to all the places Bob has mentioned, actually, interestingly, that wasn't set up. We're gonna go to Clayoquot Sound, we're gonna hear about Kennedy Lake, we're gonna go up to the Browns, but we'll also stop on the, right on the banks of the Campbell. And my wife actually is working on a paper, hot news, unpublished, from a data set from the Tai Club, and those fish were pretty stable in size until the hatchery started with enhancing with king salmon, with Chinook salmon in that river, and then that size went down considerably from there. And the reason that's interesting, of course, is they're all still the same age. Like, those fish shouldn't be changing in the size when they come back if those genetics remain the same. But I think it describes the thing that you're talking about.
It's precisely what we're talking about, yeah. And at the Percy Walker's hatchery, if anything, the fish are a lot bigger. They're, you get all kinds of 70, 80 pounds. It's amazing.
Now, I remember like a year ago, I think you came back from fishing off Haida Gwaii. Isn't that normally where you troll?
Yeah.
And you said last year was a pretty good year up there. Do you think that things are changing now that areas are recovering from forestry, or not yet, or was it just a good year? Like, are there positive signs in Haida Gwaii of recovery for troll caught fish?
There's fish, but they're 90% hatchery fish from the States. And they're all like this big. And there's lots. And they're good fish, but, so when, like, for example, when Ottawa got a huge concern about the southern resident orcas, and they tried shutting down areas here for the sports fishery to save spring salmon for the orcas, Washington State just tripled their hatchery production. And so it might be that, but there's plenty of numbers. I mean, the numbers look good. They're pretty well all hatchery fish.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And from the Columbia or Washington origin?
I mean, they still make you smile. I don't know where they're from. I mean, you don't know how many are truly hatchery fish because only some really clip the fin.
That's the back fin on the back, the adipose fin. If it's missing, it means it's a hatchery origin fish.
But if there is a fin there, it still could be the hatchery fish. It probably is. If a lot of the ones are clipped and you get one that's not clipped, it's probably a hatchery.
Yeah.
I mean, we should clip them all. They do in the States. But we don't, we clip a few here because it's too much work. It can't be done, it's gonna cost too much. Oh, wow, okay. I mean, native people, they've been practicing stuff like not taking the females when they were fishing years and, for like 100, 200 years ago. They would only take the males. And, we could be doing things like that. Sports fish, the sports fleet, they could be just keeping the males and not keeping the females, or, even try to avoid the females. Or, right now, a lot of the sports fleet release fish that are big, and because they're trying to help, But the other thing they could help is they could be trained on releasing the females. They're pretty easy to tell. Their mouth is very different. The females have a much smaller mouth and it doesn't extend past their eye, and the male, the mouth extends past the eye with a salmon. But anyhow, there's so many things we can do, and hopefully we will. But that's why I work continuously at it.
Yeah.
Trying to get some of those things. And I truly believe in the sports thing is putting out ranched fish in the sports thing. Campbell River built a fishing dock for kids, and they plant a few million pink salmon there every year. And the kids all go down there all summer, and they're all catching fish like crazy, and they're all pinks. They want hatch there, putting tape in.
Hmm.
And actually, our freshwater fisheries society, they do a lot of good work in that they stock lakes with trout. You guys must have heard about that. But they're really careful. They stock lakes that don't have a wild population. And then they put careful regulations on the lakes that have wild trout, so you don't keep them. And they tell you to go fish over at Elk Lake. It's got tons of stock trout in it, whatever. And you know, it's the same idea as planting the salmon, where they're gonna come back and it's a sports league.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, these are interesting culturing ideas, and I like the way you said, like, you can easily tell male from female, but that's actually pretty subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a practice that's practiced by DFOs that I've ever come across, is that level of field ID, but certainly could be.
Could be. And so, would it matter if you released a male too, by mistake? It's not gonna hurt.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Anyhow, it's
I mean, it is notable from hearing you talk, like, it is kind of notable from a government perspective, the bigger picture perspective. This level of dysfunction that you're describing is quite astounding. I mean, I'm just an academic, so like I'm just trained to look at things and notice them, but like that is a significant level of anger and dissatisfaction. If we had that level of anger and dissatisfaction at the road crew, like society wouldn't work, you know?
Yeah, well, can you
How did it come to be so bad?
Can you imagine me with the whole trawl thing? I mean, when I talk about it and tell you some of the stuff, I mean, it's virtually unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Do you think they listen to your ideas? That's a question I used to ask fisherman interviews back east.
they don't
actually.
like me there, okay? So, there you go. That answers that question. Clearly.
Yeah.
I actually have a question about the trolling.
You know, trolling isn't trolling.
Yeah.
Super important
But-
division. Everybody get that? Salmon are caught in 3 ways. I'll show you each of the 3 boats when we visit some commercial docks. But Bob is a troller, T-R-O-L-L-E-R. Hook and line being trolled through the water. The fish takes it, you bring it up, and then they're in really good shape. Individual fish, you ice
There was
them.
one when I was 18, and I caught it, and you clean it right back where you catch it in the stern immediately. I mean, they're golden. Okay, so go ahead.
And trawling is totally different. Yeah.
Okay. So my question was, you were saying that trawling was allowed within
No,
the.
not, what is it?
or
Trawling?
which one is
Dragger.
it?
With a
Okay.
big net.
Which one was allowed within the rockfish protection zone?
Trawl.
Trawling.
Big
That
net.
means a heavy net that's
Like on
drug
the
across the
ground.
bottom
Not
and takes
necessarily
everything.
on the bottom.
And not
And
necessarily on the bottom, but drug through
Right.
the water.
so I'm curious why that is allowed by the DFO. Is it because they have like investments or like
Mhm.
they gain profit
Well,
from that,
I-
or is it because of the votes? and
It's
the
not
votes or
even,
something?
it's not even curious, it's just amazing. It's like, that's what I say, it's quite unbelievable.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah. And I can only give you my opinion on that because it's hard to come up with a concrete reason. But it's gotta be the votes. And the whole East Coast, well, put it this way, we fished Atlantic cod on the Grand Banks. They were commercially fished for a millennium. The Basque fishing were coming over in the 9th century and the Vikings and going back to Europe with boatloads of cod. That's where a product called bacalao was invented. Does anyone know what that is? It's very popular in European countries, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal. Bacalao is salt cod. And it's not to my taste, but you know about that.
Well, I love salt cod, yeah.
So that was so the Basque fishermen could go across the ocean, fill their boats with cod, because they'd be gone for like 2 months sometimes, right? They had to sail across the Atlantic. Maybe they got in a couple of storms. And so they'd catch the cod, they would clean them like I did that salmon, and they'd clean it, and then they'd put it in the hold and sprinkle salt on it, and they'd bring back this whole load of salted cod. And so anyhow, it's we were fishing Atlantic cod for 1,000 years. DFO brought trawlers into Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and they fished it out in 25 years. Wiped out the stock. It'll never come back properly. And when it does, the same thing happens when you reduce the stock below a certain level. You guys will learn about this. The genetic diversity, just like that big bin of eggs and sperm I was talking about, stirring it all up, the genetic diversity just gets shot, and the stock will never come back. They're not strong enough. They're just weak animals. So like all the Atlantic salmon streams, or even our streams here, they've been reduced in their salmon levels down to like almost nothing. They just never come back. You might work like crazy and get them up to like 2,000 fish come back or something. Next year you got 200 a day or 170. It's, you've seen it on these things.
Yeah, and here too. I mean, I think that's a big question there right now for salmon out here. Wild salmon, again, different from hatchery origin salmon and different from farm salmon. But for wild salmon, at 2, 3, 5% of what that population used to be, the number for extinction is not 0.
No.
It's something above 0. Are we already there? I think that's a really, really
Could be
interesting
closer to
question.
10 to 15%.
You know, a lot of rivers are below 10 to 15%. Do you have hopes that you'll see wild origin river
I'm hoping
stocks?
these guys will figure that out, how to deal with that.
I already told them that this morning. Yeah.
Because that is the biggest problem when you just about wiped out a stock. And, like, they say that about sperm whales in the Pacific, that we might never build that population. Like humpback orcas, I mean, the populations are expounding, but maybe not the sperms, just because we reduced it so low.
I had a question about, you said you were fishing in Haida Gwaii, and we just learned this morning that they've made their own set of laws outside of DFO for fisheries. And I was wondering if, as a sport fisher, you notice a difference in how the fisheries managed there versus areas where it's just DFO managing?
Well, I'm commercial fishing in Haida Gwaii, number
Oh,
one.
okay, sorry.
And number 2, I'm actually fishing in an area called the disputed area. And it's another political. What the hell's going on in Ottawa? They let us fish there. Just nothing. Free to fish there. And there's about 30 miles where we say the border is there, and the US say the border is 30 miles south. So there's American boats all fishing in there, and Canadian boats. And so I fish in that area, okay, and Haida, that's north of where they are. But yes, they do. I have worked with, not just the Haida, but other bands are saying, hey, we don't want you to fish there. So all my boats don't fish there. Oh, here comes Buddy. Come on, Buddy. Say hello. He's quite a stocky fellow. Hello, Buddy. He talks a lot too. He wants food. I go in the fish store and I cut him salmon, and he just, he's a real talker.
He has an ingrown hair on his head, so just watch out for that.
Yeah, cat in a fish store. That's pretty good.
Oh yeah.
Very well
He's living the
loved.
life of Riley. Now I want some pets, you guys, until you're gonna feed me.
So that comment that you're making about Haida Gwaii, that Deb talked about the legal structure, relates actually more to herring. Not necessarily to salmon, but I think it is an interesting legal precedent of how how are these systems going to work together? And I think that's a big sort of theme of what we're going to look at is where is restoration, conservation, where are these new ideas going to come from? And how is DFO going to integrate First Nations ideas, Bob's ideas, like these ideas, the Goldstream hatchery idea, you know, the Percy Walkus hatchery idea. Like,
And this is an indigenous man. It's not-
where are those ideas getting integrated? And I think that's one place where it's not. It's by force.
Yeah.
Like people are forcing DFO to change.
Yeah, they won't listen to me either. In fact,
And it's
fight
it's
me.
quite surprising.
They don't like me coming to meetings, and you can imagine why. I mean, I got no patience for them. And they lie, and they connive, and they're deceitful. And I mean that. I'm not making it up. I'm calling the kettle black.
Would you say that there have been any positive changes in the last law that you are happy about?
Well, there's stuff like this, yes. And there are positive changes, yeah. But as soon as you say DFO, I have a hard time thinking of anything that they've done, but in fact, they've actually tried to shut them down. The ones that I'm actually thinking about, so I don't know, but I'm sure there must be some good there somewhere, but I made a decision. I lost a longtime friend of mine last August, and when that happened, I decided I was never going to another fisheries meeting, another government meeting, because they had beaten him down so badly. Wow. And I honestly believe there's a reason why he died. Anyhow, I'm not going to actually blame the death of my friend on him.
Can we like
Wow.
somehow change like the federal to like the regional level of the fisheries?
Which level?
Like instead of like the federal, can we somehow change it to like the regional level?
Well, the only way would be possibly, I'll answer that for you, Ben, is possibly, you know, what you're bringing up, how some of the native bands and their land claims are saying, you know, hey, if you're gonna be in our territory, you're gonna fish like this. So that would be regional management. Otherwise, no, DFO is never giving up fisheries. They love it. It's a joystick for votes for them. They just, you know, wow. That's how they get voted in again. And in Canada, well, anywhere a politician wants to get voted in again, but in Canada, there's some legislation that kind of makes it even more why a politician wants to get voted in. Because if you're an MP, member of parliament, and you get voted in twice, your pension for life. That's like $250,000 a year. So how hard are you gonna work at getting voted in the second time? Pretty hard, right? Anyhow. Oh, right.
I had a question for you because I have seen kind of the word sustainable gets used a lot, and especially when we're talking about declining fish stocks or populations. What does that word mean to you when it's applied to like a fishery or another entity?
What's the difference, you mean?
Like what makes it sustainable to you? Or what does that word mean? Just because I see it get used a lot, it kind of seems to have fluctuating meaning.
Well, I guess with me, you know, it's something that, one of the things that Ben and I talk about a lot is fish stocks. That's one thing, but there's fish stock relates to what it supports. So, you know, the salmon is supporting a massive ecosystem. But it just so happens that, you know, there's a socio ecosystem too. It's all you people in the room there. And me, and all the noise coming from there, even Buddy, part of the, and so I think with someone like myself, and that's why I find it interesting talking to science-based people like Ben and other friends of mine and you guys, is I think it's important that we understand that sustainability of stock is not just a certain number of fish, but its capability of sustaining what it was put, on the planet for. Mosquitoes. You don't want to get bitten by one, but they feed a lot of swallows. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you say?
I think it's a good answer to talk about what other parts of a social or ecological or fisheries ecosystem that it supports. And I like that. I like how much of it translates into insects. And I would just point out that under classical fisheries management, that is not actually accounted for numerically. Like they don't account for ecosystem withdrawals when they calculate the amount of withdrawal you can make from a fishery. And then this is a slightly off topic, but the other way I might think of that is the way that they do it for the CITES Red List, which is 3 generations. So if you have a stable population across 3 generations, and for say Chinook, that would be 15 years. It's not that long of a time period to try and keep records for and to calculate for. But I would contrast that to another number, which I calculated the other day in the middle of the night when I woke up thinking about this, after the new government came in. We have a new fisheries minister now. So I looked up all the past 4 fisheries ministers and when they came into being, and then I calculated the number of days using the Julian date calendar, and then divided it, and the average lifespan of a fisheries minister is 342 days. That's less than a year. Like, each of those people has been in that job less than a year, like much less than the time it takes for a pink salmon to go out and come back.
Yeah.
That's kind of astounding. And they're the ones making the decisions. And they came into it knowing less about fish than you do.
They're all
Seriously.
from the East Coast too, right? Like none of them have last year been from BC either.
No, that's true.
We
Yeah.
never get any from BC.
Yeah.
That might-
So, I mean, politically there is an issue there, I think, and the fisheries minister does have control over the portfolio that includes DFO, but I'm sort of speaking to a bigger thing, which is just this not having a long-term goal, 100-year goal, a 70-year goal. I'd settle for 60. Like any kind of long-term.
Well, even if the government would do what it came in to do, and why the Honorable Justin Trudeau got so unpopular was, he promised every native band would have clean water. Well, he never did that. He got them all Wi-Fi though. And then, when it came to open net cage aquaculture, as soon as it came up where he was gonna have to deal with it, he extended it for another 5 years. So it would be perfect for when the next government was getting in. Like if he got in again, so he timed it so after the whole next term, 4 years, plus a little bit. So if they didn't get in on the next time, it would completely mess with the next government, 2029. Like, wow. It was pretty simple mathematics, but and pretty simple to see that that's exactly what he did.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting politics. So,
Yeah.
I guess there's a biological definition and a political definition of sustainability there.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, thanks for these interesting ideas. I think this is a great way to start the course. We're just getting started, and to think about, what do the hatcheries do? What can they offer? What can commercial fishermen offer? What can recreational fishermen offer? I think that's really a good way to think about it, is each of these parts is part of this community, and how can they bring something in? Even government hatcheries, which I also agree they're not contributing in a good way right now. They're big facilities, they're already established. How could they possibly contribute to this recovery? So yeah, these are great examples. Thank you very much for bringing that up. And I will say, even though you seem slightly reluctant, thank you for bringing up your views about DFO, because that's important. Like, this is first-person testimony about what someone who has spent their lifetime in a government-controlled industry feels about that government control, and it's pretty bitter.
And to be clear, I'm not reluctant, but I guess I am reluctant in the fact that I'm just so tired of being negative. That's why I won't go to any more fisheries meetings. And I really don't like talking about it anymore, because it's not healthy for me personally. And, but people need to know, they need to understand how bad it is. And a lot of young people like you guys that have dipped your toe in the water with different environmental degrees and stuff. A lot of them have worked in the outside part of commercial fisheries, archipelago observers, and people working as technicians, taking data from the boats, and wow, they all see it real quick. And it is, some of those young people are just, yeah, it really is, it's quite flabbergasting to think about, the heavy hand of government.
Oh, good.
And they pick on people that aren't trawlers. That's the thing, is they open the gates for the trawlers, and then the ones that aren't, they literally pick on us. Like right now, my crew is already, because we fish in international waters outside the 200-mile limit sometimes, not often, not all the time, but sometimes often. So you're all ready to go, fresh food and everything on the boat, the crew all sitting there. DFO Friday at 4 o'clock, they called us and let us know that they're not going to give us our license until we paint these massive numbers on the side of my boat. Like, they have to be this tall, and I can't remember, it's 1.5 meters or something. And each number, and the same for width in between them, for international numbers. And that has been, it's actually in the regulations say they should be, vessels should be covered with these numbers, and that came in like in 1981. But all of a sudden, the day we're leaving, before a long weekend, or no, it wasn't long, before a weekend, so, then, I mean, it sounds simple to paint numbers on a boat, but I can tell you it is not simple. Anyhow. So, I mean, why would they do that? If I was a trawler, I guarantee you they wouldn't do that. Just the way it is.
Well, good. Well, I think interesting perspectives to start our trip on, and things to keep in mind when we are also hosted at the DFO lab on Wednesday. So, yeah, that's on the Ocean Pearl.
Yeah. But anyhow,
Wow.
I mean, plus I have that. This is a beautiful boat. There's pictures of it. Yeah. So, now I got that plastered on the side. We're on AIS, so like if a monitoring plane comes over us or another boat, they just look at their computer and it says the Ocean Pearl. And it says what speed we're going, what direction we're going. So why would you need huge numbers? Like, are they looking from the satellite or something? Or?
I don't know. AIS is the automated information system that all vessels have, and I think this is a really interesting point you're bringing up, is that technology has gotten so much better that we could integrate it for environmental reasons, environmental conservation, and yet making that transition, I think, is really difficult. So, is that your
For
boat?
example, no, it's a dragger.
Gotcha.
I mean, that's on the west coast of Vancouver Island. It says what boat it is. And So, and when you're out there, you have a navigation screen going, and you can see all the boats that are around you and how fast they're coming at you. It's made for that. It's a good system. But what, oh, they just wanted to try out fog for the weekend and just mess with it. Like, am I being negative thinking that? Probably, but it's true. So take it whichever way you want. I don't know. We asked them for the license probably 5 weeks ago. And they just wouldn't give it to us and, kept. It's an amendment that they put on our license. Anyhow. Sorry. Okay. How about
No, I
some
mean,
fun
it's
stuff?
super interesting. I think it's
Michelle,
just
can you go see if
government
they-
relationship is pretty
Fish up?
interesting stuff, so.
You go see if they cut some fish up. Some tasters.
Well, Bob, super, thanks for sharing your time with us, so.